Merry Christmas, ladies and gents. This is George Bean, and for this Christmas season, since I had reviewed the horror film Black Christmas, I thought I should review yet another Christmas movie that happens to also feature a home invasion, but is instead done in a lighthearted comedic manner. That's right, folks. In this video, I am reviewing the 1990 Christmas comedy film Home Alone, which was directed by Chris Columbus, written and produced by John Hughes, and starring Macaulay Culkin, Joe Pesci, and Daniel Stern. The plot: the McAllister family decide to spend their Christmas on a trip to Paris, only they accidentally left one thing behind: their 8-year-old son, Kevin, who ends up taking the chance to be the man of the house for a few days. But when he discovers a duo of burglars plotting to target his home on Christmas Eve, Kevin takes it upon himself to defend his home from the crooks with booby traps. Upon its release on November 18th of 1990, the film had surprisingly received a somewhat mixed critical response. Even Roger Ebert gave it 2 out of 4 stars, claiming it was implausible. However, that did not stop the movie-going audience from going to see it, and they had loved it, praising it for its charming tone and Culkin's performance. As a result, it remained at the #1 spot for 11 weeks and ended up grossing over $476 million at the worldwide box office, making it at the time the highest-grossing live-action comedy up until the 2011 release of The Hangover Part 2, and it was even the highest-grossing Christmas film of all time up until the release of The Grinch in 2018. And in the past 30 years since its release, the film has gone on to become a Christmas classic in its own right, and has been featured on television annually for the holidays, and it has even spawned a franchise that would have 4 sequels. And finally, this film has even gained tons of fans from all over the world, especially Hollywood celebrities. I mean, from what I heard, even Dakota Johnson had once claimed of Home Alone being a favorite of hers. Now, hoping that, I'd say she has earned my respect right there. The idea for this film came about when John Hughes was directing his 1989 John Candy comedy, Uncle Buck, when he was shooting the scene where Macaulay Culkin interrogates a would-be sitter through a letter opening on the front door. It was from this scene alone that where Hughes had first came up with the idea for what would become Home Alone, and thus he had immediately wrote the script within just a few days. And when it came to picking a director, Hughes had initially chosen Columbus to direct National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, but Columbus dropped out of that film due to clashing differences with star Chevy Chase. Soon after, Hughes had then given Columbus 2 scripts, one of which was Home Alone, and according to Columbus, the other script was called Reach the Rock, a script which Hughes would eventually make into a film in 1998. Columbus had ultimately chose Home Alone because it fitted more in line with elements from his previous works, such as The Goonies and Adventures in Babysitting. And when it came to who was going to play the main character, Kevin McAllister, John Hughes was already dead set on Macaulay Culkin as his choice, having just worked with him on Uncle Buck. And while Columbus also believed Culkin was perfect, he really didn't want to immediately cast him just yet, and instead wanted to audition many other child actors for the role to make the casting seem fair. An interesting thing is that Hughes was worried that mothers would never believe that a family could forget one of their kids. Columbus once recalled, "John really filled in every possible logic hole, and the audience always bought it." Which is good. He does try what he can to make the idea of a child being accidentally left behind seem plausible. But in today's world now, with cell phones, that would never happen. But anyway, of course this film would end up being followed by sequels, starting with Home Alone 2, Lost in New York in 1992, which featured the entire cast and crew returning. And while it was a success, it had met some criticism for basically rehashing the first film's plot line. But still, it is considered a classic alongside the first film, and I will still happily watch it alongside the first film. Then comes Home Alone 3 in 1997, which was a complete standalone with a different cast and crew, with the sole exception of writer-producer John Hughes. It wasn't successful as Fox might have hoped, and received negative reviews. But to admit, I do see the film as a childhood guilty pleasure of mine. I thought the new kid actor Alex D. Linz was decent in his own right. And making the villains international terrorist spies makes their comeuppances all the more embarrassing and hilarious if you ask me. And Home Alone 3 was actually the very first movie I had ever seen in a cinema theater. That was when I was 4 years old, believe it or not. I'm not kidding you, I was 4 when I saw Home Alone 3 in the cinema. And next up we have Home Alone 4, which was a direct-to-TV standalone film with none of the original cast and crew returning. Of course it did feature Kevin and Marv returning, but with different actors. While there were some decent booby traps in it, the fourth film is pretty bad. It makes the third film look better in comparison, if you ask me. And finally, we've got Home Alone 5, The Holiday Heist, yet another direct-to-TV film that aired on what was once ABC Family in 2012, and starred Malcolm McDowell, shockingly. I've yet to watch it, nor do I actually wish to want to watch it at all. As far as you should be concerned with Home Alone 4 and 5, I'd recommend that you just skip them. They are really not worth your time. Just pretend as if they had never existed. Trust me, you will not regret it. But it doesn't just stop there. Just some time ago, I had heard recent news that Disney had announced their intentions to reboot Home Alone for the Disney Plus streaming service, given how they, as of March this year, they are the de facto corporate owners of 20th Century Fox, who themselves own the Home Alone franchise. As a Home Alone fan, I honestly don't like the idea of rebooting the series, especially if it's just going to be for their Disney Plus. Why not just leave the franchise alone and do something original? Maybe do an homage to it, but not straight up remake or reboot it. But that's all I can ever say about that now. Now, as for me, I used to grow up on Home Alone 1 and 2 since I was a little kid, and Home Alone 3 as well. And they have also become Christmas favorites of mine when growing up. I even enjoyed the third film again. These films are ones that will still hold a special place in my heart. And if I even get to have kids in the future, these are movies I would happily show them when they are young. I mean, I do show them to my nephew and twin nieces, and they loved it. For those who might know me, I'm a fan of movies that involve home invasions, which has been a small underlying fear of mine as a small kid. And to see this movie as a kid blew me away. Seeing this young kid actually defending his home from intruders with booby traps was amazing to me. This movie had made me feel courageous in wanting to protect my home from intruders too. Sure, I may not have made booby traps inside my house, but it did, the paranoia had kind of mellowed down from it watching Home Alone. And I'd say that feeling of fear and paranoia had paid off well for me. And now with I myself as an aspiring screenwriter who has been doing that for over 10 years, I have learned to channel my home invasion fears into some of my screenplays. So, good on me, I guess. Now for the cast. Macaulay Culkin was perfectly cast as Kevin McAllister. He displays at first a sense of childhood fear, but then progressively becomes confident and even brave when he learns how it feels to be the man of the house. And I also like how, uh, uh, his uh, his being alone is sort of like a Christmas wish for him, but he begins to take back what he wished, and realizing that he's better off with his family, and that being alone isn't very beneficial at all. So when he so it's a nice little sort of like a Christmas Carol type of approach going on with Kevin. I will say it is nice to see Culkin nowadays popping up on people's YouTube channels, including James Rolfe. He really seems to be doing pretty good with himself, and he appears to be happy with his life now. And as a side note, I'd recommend you check out another movie Culkin was in from 1993 called The Good Son. He was really good in that, I believe. If you haven't seen it, I recommend checking it out, just for Culkin's performance in that as a sociopathic boy. Check it out, man. I think it's underrated. Now, if there was one cast member I feel I need to bring up in this review, then it has to be Joe Pesci as the burglar Harry. He was once again amazing in this film, playing the brains of the duo, and it's when he's experiencing the booby traps is when his comedy comes out very well here, especially when he ends up slipping and falling on the ice-slippery porch stairs up to the front twice. And here, and just seeing him first in this film, this is my first film I saw him in, so it was nice to see him in this before I actually got to see him in Goodfellas. Otherwise, I'd have been scared shitless of him in this film. And he was amazing, and I just love it. You can tell that he's trying so hard not to curse in this film, saying fridge instead of fuck. I mean, it's amazing. And 1990 turned out to be a great year for Pesci, given how it was Home Alone and Goodfellas that came out, and it was this film that single-handedly earned him, like, an award win, either Academy or Oscar. And Daniel Stern is brilliant as Marv. He plays the role as such a space cadet, very dim-witted and light-headed. Obviously not the brightest of the two. I love the one scene when Harry and Marv are staking out the McAllister house, and Harry tells Marv to go check it out. Marv just nods, but then turns to Harry all confused and says, "Now?" Harry rolls his eyes and says, "No, tomorrow, egghead, now!" I love that. It's a really funny moment between them. It's like, oh god, Marv, you know? You can see Harry's frustration. And Catherine O'Hara was amazing as Kevin's mother, Kate. She gave the character a sense of gravitas and depth. She also gave her the impression that she does care for Kevin and wish to return back home to him, just to make sure that he is alright. That shows that she is trying to rectify her mistake of accidentally forgetting him and leaving him behind. So she's determined to head back home straight on, even if it meant for her to take a trip like Steve Martin did in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, even running into John Candy at one point. And yay, John Candy, the legend. Love that man. I think one reason why audiences warmed up to this film is its heartwarming message about how, no matter what nasty things you might say to your family, you probably might not actually mean it to them, and that it should be important to be with your family no matter what, especially when they need you the most, or even on Christmas. It is even shown among the McAllister family when they're in Paris that even they themselves realize that it doesn't feel the same without Kevin around, thus even realize how much they miss him too. I absolutely love the music score by John Williams. I strongly believe it is one of his very best film scores in his entire career. Very tear-jerky emotional, with some nice moments of comedy in it as well. Now, one thing I felt I need to bring this up, if you ask me, is that yes, Home Alone, it is a Christmas favorite of mine. But I also kind of see it as being the start of John Hughes' sort of downfall as a writer. Allow me to put it this way. In the 1980s, John Hughes was the king of teen movies. His honest-to-God look into everyday teenage life and his perfect balance of comedy and drama had made him a very successful filmmaker in Hollywood. But since then, Hughes' career has been like being on a mountain. Come 1990, with Home Alone, was when he had reached his peak as a writer. But since then, as the 1990s rolled around, is when he started making even more family-friendly films, mostly aimed towards children, and especially dabbing into more slapstick comedy. Especially in films like Dennis the Menace, Baby's Day Out, 101 Dalmatians, Flubber, even culminating with Home Alone 3, Oh, the Poetry. And since then, he had just fell off the Hollywood radar. I believe it is because he had just gotten tired of the Hollywood machine. I heard he had even blamed Hollywood for sort of causing John Candy's heart attack death in '94. So I just do hope that he had enjoyed his post-Hollywood retirement in peace. But it appeared that despite him retiring into exile, Hughes had never stopped writing, even up until his death in 2009. That means that, for all we know, there may actually be multitudes of scripts he had written that are now locked away in a desk in his house right now, collecting dust for years to come. But overall, anyway, I'm willing to give Home Alone a rating of 8 stars out of 10, because it is a wonderfully heartwarming Christmas film that every family of all ages can enjoy, a brilliant home invasion film that kids can watch and enjoy. The acting was good in its own right. So yes, if you want you and your family to watch a movie to enjoy on Christmas time, then for my personal recommendation, I'd say that Home Alone and its sequel might just be the perfect film or films for that particular movie night for you and your family, especially on Christmas. So thank you for watching, ladies and gents. You have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and wish you all that. You ladies and gents have a Merry Christmas. So thanks for watching, and until then, I will see you all next time. Ho ho ho! Peace!